Picture this. It's a Saturday morning in 1994. You're 11 years old, and your dad has just said the 4 words that made your entire week. We're going to Dixons. The air outside is cold and grey, that particular British grey that smells of exhaust fumes and wet pavement. But inside your chest, pure electricity. You knew exactly what waited for you in there. Row after row of glowing screens, the hiss and click of machines doing things you barely understood. And that smell, warm plastic, new carpet, something almost metallic, the smell of the future. Most people remember the 1990s as the decade when computers came home. And they're right, but what they forget, what gets lost, is what it actually felt like to stand inside one of those shops. The ritual of it, the theatre, because buying a computer in the 90s wasn't just a transaction, it was an event. By 1993, home computer ownership in Britain had reached around 5 million households. That sounds like a lot. It wasn't. It meant that for most families, a computer was still a luxury, a gamble, a conversation that started months before any money changed hands. The shop was where you went to want things, not always to buy them. Let's go back to the high street. Early 1990, the big names were already staking their claim. Dixons, Currys, the specialist chains like Microbyte and Byte Computer Superstores. And tucked between them, in units that smelled of old carpet and ambition, dozens of independent shops with hand-lettered signs in the window advertising Amiga 500 bundles and Atari ST deals. The window displays were extraordinary, not slick, not minimal, maximum, stacked boxes. Posters for games you'd never heard of yet. Prices written in red marker on fluorescent card. The effect was overwhelming. You pressed your face against the glass and felt your brain go slightly fizzy. Step inside and the noise hit you first. Not music, beeps. The demo machines were always running something. A tinny rendition of music from Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. The percussive crack of a football being kicked in sensible soccer. Someone's Amiga playing the cannon fodder title screen on a loop. The little digital soldiers marching cheerfully toward their doom. The staff were a type. You knew them immediately. They were almost always young men, late teens, early 20s, with the particular confidence of someone who actually knew things. Not aggressive, not pushy, just quietly authoritative in a way that made your dad stand slightly straighter. One of them, a lad called Darren who worked at a Birmingham Microbyte through 1992 and 1993, later described his job as being the village elder for people who'd never touched a mouse. He'd spend entire Saturday afternoons explaining the difference between RAM and storage to baffled fathers while their kids quietly tried to load Street Fighter II on the demo unit in the corner. That was the unspoken arrangement. Parents talked to Darren. Kids played the games. By 1993, the battle lines were being redrawn. The Amiga and the Atari ST, those beloved, creative, slightly anarchic machines, were starting to feel the pressure. IBM-compatible PCs running DOS and then Windows 3.1 were creeping into view. They were ugly. They were beige. They were serious-looking. And the shops didn't quite know what to make of them yet. Walk into a Dixons in late 1993 and you'd see both worlds existing in an uneasy truce. On one side, the Amiga 1200, sleek and powerful, surrounded by games boxes screaming in neon colours. On the other, a beige tower from Packard Bell or Elenex, running Windows 3.1 at 33 MHz with a mouse that felt like pushing a bar of soap across a desk. The price tags were brutal. A decent PC setup, tower, monitor, printer could cost $1,500. In 1993, when the average British weekly wage was around $340, most families did the maths and walked out carrying an Amiga box. But the shops weren't just about hardware. The software sections were their own world entirely. Shelves and shelves of cardboard boxes, some enormous those big box PC games from Sierra Online and LucasArts with their thick manuals and their feeling of weight, and some tiny in those slim plastic cases that Amiga and Atari games came in. You'd stand there for 20 minutes just reading the backs of boxes. The screenshots were painted, actually painted sometimes. The promises on the back were heroic. 100 hours of gameplay, total immersion, revolutionary artificial intelligence. You believed all of it. The smell in the software aisle was specific. New plastic, slightly chemical, the faint perfume of whatever they used to clean the lino. If you smell it now, in any context, you are 11 years old again, holding a copy of Monkey Island 2, doing the maths on how many weeks' pocket money it would take. Then came 1995, and everything changed. Windows 95 launched on 24th August 1995. And the shops, the high street computer shops, suddenly transformed into something else entirely. The queues that formed outside PC World and Dixons that morning weren't for a new games console. They weren't for a gadget. They were for an operating system. The marketing had been that good. The Rolling Stones had licensed Start Me Up to Microsoft for the campaign. 24-hour launches, breathless coverage on Newsnight. Inside the shops, the staff were outnumbered. The questions came faster than anyone could handle. What's the internet? Can it play my old games? Do I need to buy a new computer entirely? Often the answer to that last one was yes. And that meant another conversation about money. Another family standing in a beige-lit aisle, doing the same maths as before, but with bigger numbers now. PC World, which had opened its first warehouse-style store in 1991, suddenly looked like the future. Vast, fluorescent, overwhelming in a completely different way from the old high street shops. Less like theatre and more like an aircraft hangar where everything happened to be beige. The smaller shops felt it first. The independents who'd built their businesses on Amiga expertise, on knowing every cartridge and cable and peripheral, found themselves speaking a language that was becoming obsolete. Some adapted, some didn't. A woman named Sandra ran a small computer shop in Shrewsbury from 1991 to 1997. She sold Amigas, repaired them, taught customers how to use them. At her peak, she employed 3 people. By 1996, she was selling second-hand PCs and printing flyers at cost just to keep the lights on. The big shops could undercut me on price, she said later. I couldn't compete with that. What I had was knowledge. But people stopped valuing knowledge when everything was suddenly cheaper to just replace. There's a whole Britain in that sentence. And yet, walk into any of those shops, any of them, in any year of that decade, and what you remember most isn't the hardware or the prices or the slow death of the independents. What you remember is the feeling, the warmth, the hum, the particular quality of light from a dozen cart monitors all glowing at once, that slightly blue-white shimmer that you don't see anywhere now. The weight of a box under your arm as you carried it to the counter. The care with which the receipt was folded and placed inside the bag. By 1999, the landscape had shifted almost entirely. PC World, Currys, and Dixons dominated. The game shops, Electronics Boutique Game Virgin Megastore's computer section, had carved out their own territory. The independents were mostly gone. The Amiga was finished. The internet was arriving, slowly, noisily, through a 56K modem that screeched like something in pain. The future had arrived. It just hadn't quite sorted itself out yet. We had slower computers, smaller screens, less choice. The technology that seemed miraculous in 1993 was obsolete by 1997. And yet somehow, standing in one of those shops, pressing the keys on a demo machine while your mum waited patiently nearby, it felt like standing at the edge of something infinite. We had less. But somehow, it felt like more. If you were there, if you stood in a Dixons or a Microbyte or a tiny independent on a rainy Saturday and felt that particular fizz of possibility, you know exactly what I mean. That feeling doesn't have a modern equivalent. It lived in those rooms, in those years, and it was real. If this brought back memories, share it with someone who remembers. Please subscribe to keep these stories alive. And drop a comment with your favourite computer shop memory. What machine were you looking at? What game did you want? And did you ever actually get it?